There's something romantic about going off-grid. People glamorize it online, showing wood stoves, mountain sunrises, and cups of coffee in rustic mugs. But when I decided to actually do it, to commit to real isolation, I wasn't chasing aesthetics. I was chasing silence, stillness, something real. I was 29, freshly laid off, sick of the concrete, the lights, the constant noise of the world. I didn't tell many people. Just packed up what I could into my old Subaru, canceled everything utilities, subscriptions, even my lease, and headed north. The cabin sat miles past the last paved road, deep in the Bitterroot Range. It had belonged to some reclusive hunter who passed away a decade prior. A neighbor found the listing on a backwoods forum and forwarded it to me with a joke. "Here's your hermit paradise." It was cheap, suspiciously so. One-room log structure, no electricity, wood stove for heat, a rain catch system, and a hand pump well. I drove up to see it once in mid-March and stood in the clearing, surrounded by towering firs and snow-dusted ridgelines, and something in me just settled. Like I'd found what I didn't know I was looking for. By mid-April, I had moved in full-time. I brought books, tools, seeds for a garden, survival gear, and more than enough food to last through the summer. The days fell into a simple rhythm. I'd wake with the sun, haul wood or water, cook over the stove, and read until dusk. At night, I journaled by lantern light and listened to the whisper of trees swaying outside. No news, no texts, no social media. Just me and the forest. At first, the silence was a gift. You don't realize how much modern life clutters your mind until it's gone. No engines, no sirens, no talking, no hum of electronics, just wind, birds, and your own breath. I slept better than I had in years. I started talking to myself out loud. Not because I was lonely, just because there was finally space for my thoughts to echo. But somewhere in the third week, something shifted. Not suddenly, it crept. Like the way dusk slowly overtakes the trees. The silence didn't feel restful anymore. It felt full, pressurized, like something was holding its breath. Like I wasn't alone anymore, and I wasn't supposed to notice. The birds still sang, but they didn't come close. The wind still blew, but it never touched the clearing. And then came the first night I woke up unsure of why. Just alert. A silence so complete, it felt like the air was thicker. I sat up in bed, and the hairs on my arms stood up. No breeze. No creaks. Just the pulsing knowledge that something had changed. That something was awake with me. Watching. Listening. And that night was the last time I wrote in my journal without hesitation. It started with footsteps. Not heavy, more like the soft crunch of pine needles, distant at first, then pausing just outside the window. I remember freezing mid-sentence in my journal, the pen tip resting against the paper. I waited, straining to hear more, but there was only silence. The next morning, I convinced myself it had been a deer or maybe a trick of the wind, but it stayed with me all day, the knowing. The gut-deep sense that something had walked up to the cabin, stood inches from the glass, and decided not to knock. I started locking the cabin door at night, something I hadn't done before. And after a few more evenings of that same creeping sensation of being watched, tracked, circled-I dragged an old metal chair from the shed and wedged it under the handle. Then the sounds changed. The soft footsteps became scratching, gentle, almost polite at first, like fingertips running across the wooden siding. Then louder, more deliberate. One night, it circled the entire cabin. Scratch, 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 pausing at the front door, then the back, then right beneath the bedroom window where my head lay frozen against the pillow. I didn't sleep until dawn. The next day, I searched for prints, tracks, anything. But the earth around the cabin was undisturbed. No broken branches, no drag marks, just my own boot prints. It made me question everything. Maybe I was unraveling. Maybe isolation was finally playing tricks. So I forced myself to keep a routine, cleaning, hiking short loops, writing, but every evening, as the sun bled behind the trees, dread settled into my bones like cold water. It wasn't just the sounds. Things began to move. I'd place a knife on the table and find it later in the dish rack. My coffee cube always on the counter appeared one morning on the edge of my bed. My flashlight disappeared entirely, then returned 3 days later, fully charged and sitting atop my pillow. And then came the knocking. Not hard, not violent. Just 3 slow, deliberate taps on the wall, always the farthest side of the cabin, never the door, like it wanted me to come outside, to look, but I never did. I would sit frozen, staring into the black window pane, listening to my own breath bounce off the walls. One night, I made the mistake of answering, just once. I whispered, "Who's there?" And instantly, the tapping stopped. Not faded stopped, as if whatever had been there was waiting for that exact moment. I didn't hear anything else for hours, but when I woke up just before sunrise, the front door was wide open. The chair I'd wedged under the handle was still there, completely undisturbed. I started sleeping with the axe next to my bed. I stopped cooking, stopped writing. The trees outside never swayed anymore, no matter the wind. The forest had gone still. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was waiting. The knocking returned this time louder. No rhythm, just hard, irregular thuds, like fists slamming into the wall. I jumped out of bed, axe in hand, and stood still in the middle of the room. The noise circled again, left side, back wall, then front. Something was out there, and it was getting braver. I shouted, "Get out of here!" My voice cracked the silence like glass. The knocking stopped. For a few seconds, there was nothing but the fire's quiet hiss. Then I heard it breathing. Slow, deliberate, not mine, not animal, human, right outside the door. I backed up against the far wall, axe raised, heart pounding. The doorknob rattled, just slightly, then again, and again. I could see the metal vibrating. Something or someone was trying to open it. I screamed, full force, and the rattling stopped. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the corner, knees tight to my chest, axe across my lap, eyes on the door. When morning came, I crept outside, half expecting to see footprints in the frost, but again nothing. No signs, no tracks. That day, I made a decision. I was going to leave. I didn't care how far the nearest town was. I didn't care how long it would take to hike out. I packed only what I needed: water, some food, a flare gun, and waited for nightfall. I knew if I left in the dark, I'd lose whatever was watching me, or I'd die trying. I waited until the sun dipped below the trees. With my bag on my shoulders and the flare gun strapped to my belt, I stepped outside. The air was colder than usual, the kind of cold that sinks into your teeth. The forest was too quiet, no wind, no birds, just the sound of my own boots crunching leaves. I didn't take the road. I cut through the woods, navigating by compass and instinct, trying to stay hidden, even though I wasn't sure from what. Every few minutes, I looked over my shoulder. I never saw anything, but I felt it like the trees themselves were watching, leaning in closer with every step. I hiked for hours through thickets and over ridgelines, the cabin long gone behind me. But the silence never left. It moved with me. And somewhere near midnight, I realized something that made my stomach turn. I hadn't seen the stars. Not one. The sky above was black, not cloudy, just absent. Like something had pressed down over the forest and blocked everything out. That's when I heard it. Breathing. Again, not far, maybe 20 feet. I dropped behind a log, hands shaking, and aimed the flare gun into the dark. I didn't want to shoot it. I didn't want to know what I'd see. But it got closer. Leaves shifted. A branch cracked. I fired. The flare screamed into the trees and exploded into blood-red light, and for 1 second I saw it. A shape. Human-sized but wrong. Too thin. Too long. Its skin was pale like tree bark, and its eyes didn't reflect the light. They absorbed it. It didn't run. It didn't flinch. It just watched. And then the light burned out and I ran. I don't remember how I found the road. I don't remember how I got to the ranger station or how I collapsed into the arms of a man with a radio. They found my cabin days later. The door was wide open. My things were untouched. But every tree around the clearing had been stripped of bark, 7 feet high. In a perfect circle. I never went back. I never will. And I haven't slept in silence since. Because silence isn't peace. Sometimes, silence is something waiting for you to speak first. I inherited the property from an uncle I barely knew. My mother used to call him the Recluse, and when I was little, I thought that meant wizard or something magical. But now, standing at the edge of the land he left me, recluse just meant forgotten. 30 acres of dense woods, a small A-frame cabin, a rusted greenhouse swallowed by vines, and no electricity. The place was so far off-grid, even Google Maps showed nothing but a green blur. Still, I needed the escape. I had just walked out of a miserable job, a worse relationship, and the kind of apartment that makes you feel like you're slowly shrinking. I figured this would be temporary, a month or two to reset, to breathe again. The cabin was in better shape than I expected. Cobwebs, sure, dust and rot, but the bones were good. The air smelled wildrich with soil and cedar and rain. I lit candles and set up my cot, then explored the property. The greenhouse stood at the back edge, where the woods thickened into shadow. It was strange, mostly intact despite decades of neglect. Glass panes fogged with moss, rusty frames, vines coiled like veins along every edge, and inside, I swore I saw movement. I told myself it was a bird, or a rabbit, or the wind catching the leaves just right. I didn't go in that day. I wasn't scared exactly, just unsettled. Like the way certain rooms in old buildings make you feel watched. That first night, I barely slept. The woods groaned with wind and animals, but beneath it all, I kept thinking about the greenhouse, about the shape I thought I saw inside. The way the door had been cracked open just slightly, as if waiting. I decided I'd go in the next morning, just to clear my head, just to prove to myself there was nothing there. But when I got there at sunrise, the door was closed and locked. From the inside, I spent the morning circling the greenhouse, looking for a way in. Every window was latched from the inside. The main door, which had been slightly open yesterday, was now sealed shut with an old iron bolt. I tugged at it, even tried forcing the handle with a crowbar I found in the shed, but nothing gave. It was like the thing had decided to close itself. That night, I dreamed of the inside, of thick green vines curling around rusted gardening tools, a pale shape moving behind the glass. I woke drenched in sweat. My candle had gone out, but the moon cast pale light through the cabin windows. I stepped outside for air. That's when I saw it. The greenhouse door open again, just enough to invite someone in. I walked toward it, barefoot, barely breathing, but halfway there, I stopped. Inside, behind the glass, I saw someone, or something. A tall figure standing motionless in the far corner, shrouded in vines. It didn't move when I approached. Didn't flinch when I whispered. But I knew it saw me. I felt the weight of its attention like cold fingers down my spine. I backed away slowly, never breaking eye contact if you could call it that. The figure never followed, but the door stayed open for hours. Even after I locked myself inside the cabin, even after I covered the windows. The next day, the door was shut again, and this time the figure was gone. But something had changed. My tools had been moved. My journal left open on the page where I had written the dream. The plants around the greenhouse looked healthier, vibrant, too vibrant. Their leaves shone unnaturally green, almost wet. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table trying to convince myself to leave. But I couldn't. Not because I was scared, though I was, but because something wouldn't let me go. Like a hook behind my ribs, tugging me back toward that place. And when night fell, I found myself standing at the door again, candle in hand, staring at that glass building, waiting for it to move. And of course it did. On the fourth night, I couldn't resist anymore. I took a flashlight, crowbar, and the journal, and I walked straight to the greenhouse just after midnight. The sky was heavy with clouds, no moon. Just the hum of insects and the throb of my own heartbeat. The door was open again, not cracked wide open, as if it had been waiting. I stepped inside. The air was warm, wet, breathing. The flashlight's beam cut through thick vines hanging from the ceiling like ropes. The floor was layered in damp moss. Flowering plants I couldn't name bloomed in unnatural colors, deep black blossoms, pulsing orange bulbs. Some of them looked like they were moving, ever so slightly. The walls were covered in drawings, hand-scratched with charcoal, dirt, maybe even blood. Faces, dozens of them, all identical, all wide-eyed, all staring. My flashlight began to flicker. I tapped it and the light steadied, just in time to catch something shift in the far corner. It was the figure, now closer, not standing anymore, hanging. Its feet didn't touch the ground. Vines had pulled it upward, cocooning its torso, limbs splayed. But it wasn't struggling. It was calm. Its eyes locked on mine. Not human, not anymore. I turned to run, but something grabbed my leg. A vine, snaking from the soil, wrapping tight around my ankle. I slashed at it with the crowbar. Another vine grabbed my wrist. Then another. I dropped the flashlight and screamed. Total blackness. The greenhouse groaned like it was breathing through the glass. Suddenly a light, bright, searing white from my journal. I had dropped it on the ground, and it was glowing. The pages curled, and the light surged upward, filling the room. The vines recoiled. The figure wailed high-pitched and shrill, like the scream of something ancient. And then, silence. The vines dropped. The greenhouse door slammed shut behind me, and the light vanished. I was alone. I don't remember leaving. Just the forest moving around me, the taste of dirt and iron in my mouth, and the feeling that something was still crawling on my skin. I stumbled back to the cabin, just as the sky began to lighten false dawn, casting everything in sickly gray. I locked every door, every window, stuffed towels under the cracks, and waited. When I finally dared to sleep, it was shallow and full of noise. I dreamed of roots breaking through the floorboards, curling around my spine, threading through my skull like they wanted to replace me. When I awoke, the candles were all out, and the journal, the one that saved me, was gone. I left the next morning. Didn't pack, didn't eat. I just ran. Down the path, through the trees, until I hit the service road a mile out. I flagged down a pickup truck with a busted headlight. The man behind the wheel didn't ask questions. He just looked at me, wide-eyed, and said, "You came from there?" Before gunning the engine. It took me weeks to calm down, months to sleep again. But even now, I still feel it. That pull, that quiet whisper in my mind when it rains, or when I pass a garden with overgrown vines. A few weeks ago, I got a package, no return address. Inside was a single item, my uncle's journal. But it wasn't blank like before. The pages were full sketches, diagrams, names, mine included. And at the very end, written in shaky, leaf-stained ink, "You're the next seed, water yourself." I moved to the desert because I thought I wanted silence. Not just quiet, I wanted nothing. No neighbors, no Wi-Fi, no cell towers humming overhead. I found a rundown trailer about 3 hours outside of anything that could be called civilization. It was parked in a dried-out canyon, surrounded by red rock and wind-scraped nothingness. There was a generator, a propane stove, a shortwave radio, and not much else. Exactly what I thought I needed. The first week was bliss. The kind of stillness that buzzes in your ears, like your brain's trying to fill the void with its own noise. I read paperbacks by lantern light, walked the trails barefoot, listened to the wind push sand against the aluminum siding at night. It felt ancient, cleansing, but after that first week, something started to change. It began with the radio. I didn't touch it much, it was old, analog, hard to tune, but one night I was feeling nostalgic and decided to see if I could pick up anything. I turned the dial slowly, chasing crackles and hums, until I landed on a faint voice. It wasn't music, or a broadcast. It sounded like someone talking low, deliberate, just beneath the static. I could barely make it out. Something like, "Turn off the light. They see it." I laughed. Figured it was a pirate signal, or maybe my brain playing tricks. I shut it off and went to bed. But the next night it came on by itself. The dial spinning. The voice louder this time. They're under the sand, waiting. That's when I realized the trailer's antenna had been extended, and I hadn't touched it. I tried to tell myself it was just interference. Maybe some old shortwave chatter bouncing off the ionosphere. Maybe even military. The desert has plenty of secrets buried beneath its sand. But the messages, they got clearer. The third night, I came back from hiking a ridge and found the trailer door open. No wind could have done that. Inside, the radio was on again. Same channel. Same voice. Don't listen when they knock. Don't let them smell you. The antenna was now higher, like someone had telescoped it fully. I hadn't even known it extended that far. I yanked the power from the radio, stuffed it in a cabinet, locked it with a padlock I found under the sink. That night, the knocking started. It wasn't loud, not like a fist. It was soft rhythmic, like something tapping metal with bone. It circled the trailer. Talk, talk, talk. A slow walk around the walls. I held my breath. Didn't move. The windows were small and high, meant for keeping light out, not watching the world. But I swore I saw a shadow pause just beyond the far pane, then move on. By morning, nothing was there. No footprints, no damage. The generator was full, but the radio was back on the table. Out of the cabinet. Plugged in. The padlock gone. The voice returned that afternoon, repeating the same phrase for over an hour. You can dig, but you won't find them until they want you to. I began to notice other things too. The sand near the trailer shifted, disturbed. Like something big had crawled under the surface. My boots would sink too far, even when the rest of the ground stayed firm. The air buzzed with pressure. A low hum, like an electrical line nearby, but there were no lines for miles. I dug that evening, out of desperation. A few feet from the trailer, where the radio had hummed the loudest. I only got about 2 feet down before I hit something flat and cold. Not stone, not metal, something else. And it started knocking back. I ran. Back into the trailer. Slammed the door. Piled everything heavy I could find against it, books, gas canisters, the tiny fridge. Then I sat in the dark, knees to my chest, holding a kitchen knife that felt as useless as a twig. The knocking didn't stop. It got louder. Faster. From all sides. It was like whatever was outside had multiplied. Or maybe it had always been more than one. The trailer began to vibrate and not shake, but hum. Like the metal itself was vibrating at a frequency my bones couldn't ignore. Then came the voice again, but this time, not from the radio. It came from under the floor. Open the door. It sounded like my voice, but distorted, drawn out, smiling. I screamed and ripped open the trapdoor to the crawl space under the trailer, shining my flashlight into the blackness. Just dirt and wiring. But something was there pushing upward from the earth. Fingers. Dozens. Long. Translucent. Twitching like roots. They gripped the underside of the floorboards, testing them. One popped through a crack near my foot, curling toward me like it recognized me. I slashed at it with the knife it retracted. Then silence. Dead. Terrifying silence. No wind. No buzz. Even the air felt wrong, like I was inside a vacuum. And then, the trailer door opened. Not forced. Not slammed. It just creaked. The wind picked up, blowing sand into the doorway. I couldn't see anything past it, but I felt something like a low frequency crawling up my spine. Like whatever had been whispering through the radio was finally in the room with me. And it whispered again. From everywhere at once. The broadcast is over. Now comes the signal. I don't remember walking outside. I don't remember the sandstorm parting from me like a curtain. I only remember the way the static sounded in my ear-sharp close, like it wasn't just around me anymore. It was inside me. When I came to, I was in my car, dust-caked, parked at the edge of the highway. My boots were missing. My jeans were ripped at the knees, and there was blood under my fingernails. The key was in the ignition, though I had no memory of turning it. I drove until I saw lights. I don't even remember the first town's name, just the gas station, and the woman behind the counter who stared too long at the dirt on my skin. I didn't talk, just handed her cash and left. Weeks passed, then months. I tried to forget the desert, the trailer, the fingers under the floor, but I can't, 'cause the radio still works. Not the one from the trailer, I left that behind. This is the one in my car. It turns on by itself now, always to static. Sometimes I swear I hear my name buried inside the crackling, stretched into long, unfamiliar syllables. Last week, I found sand in my shoes. I haven't worn them in months. Last night, I woke up to the sound of knocking, not on my door, not on my walls, but beneath the bed. This morning, the antenna on my roof was extended.